For today's project, I am using watercolor paper. Last time I used canvas paper, but today I decided I wanted to try watercolor paper and diluted acrylic paints that I put in these little plastic bottles. I started spraying the water and then I realized that's not what I wanted to do. So then I wiped it off again because I wanted to seal and put a thin layer over the watercolor paper. Last time I tried this, I had only taped off my paper with that pinkish tape that you see around the corner of my paper here, and unfortunately this tape does not seal very well, and I had used quite a bit of water on it, and then in the end when I took the tape off I realized it had seeped underneath, and that's never fun. So now I have double taped it, and I'm also putting a layer of white paint just around the tape edges so that I can make doubly sure that this is not going to happen again. And then I'm also using a very, very thin layer and an uneven layer of that white paint to scrape across the paper just to give it a little bit extra texture, because I have a feeling that some of that paint is going to seep into the untreated watercolor paper, which will hopefully give it a different texture. After that is done, I'm gonna let it dry, and you can see as I'm picking up the paper that it's fairly uneven, that layer. So now, without having a plan whatsoever, I'm just starting to drizzle some of that paint onto the surface. I have worked on a different project before, like I said, and it had turned out so pretty that I wanted to try it again. And so now I have sprayed my dots. The dots were still wet. I did not let them dry, but I just sprayed them with water. And sometimes I wish I could just leave it like that because it looked really pretty. But I decided to mix them right on top of the paper. I like not taping down the paper onto a surface that I cannot move, because I like to pick it up and give the paint a little bit more movement. I am not going for any specific look. I just want to put down some color for a background that I can then doodle on. I noticed that my light green had disappeared, and so now I'm just going to put a little bit more on top. I tend to use too much water when I work this way, and I didn't want the green to dilute too much, So I just started using the brush to move the paint around, and then later on used a little bit more water. Again, that green is disappearing a little bit, but my goal was to let the paint move around on the page a little bit more, and for that I just needed a little bit more water. In the end, I kind of wished I had left those dots because they do give more texture on the paper when it's dry, and more ways for me to have something to doodle with. But unfortunately, I got rid of them. But then again, sometimes the composition just works out that way. You will find other ways to make it interesting, and so, you know, it just, sometimes you get rid of things that you wish you had kept, and other times in the end it just works out. So I added a little bit more of that light green. And I'm just trying to dilute it or mix it with the paint that is already there using the brush before I add more water. I really was looking for a little bit brighter spots, and it was a little bit too blue, so I decided more green was in order. When you dilute the acrylic paints like that, they really work just like watercolors. I wasn't sure how it would behave, but I ended up liking the surface that it provided for my markers. Sometimes I feel that the watercolor paper is a little bit rougher on my markers, especially the thin ones, and so I just wanted to see if the acrylic paints, if they would be more gentle on my pens, and if they would provide me with a more watercolor look background. And I'm happy to say that it did. I am showing you my favorite pens. I switched them up during the composition that I do when I draw the neurographic lines. So sometimes I have thinner tipped pens, other times I work with the thicker ones. I like to switch up the lines in thickness so that your eye has different things to look at. I'm currently liking the rectangular shapes, so I started out with those. Sometimes I get comments asking, how do you know where to put your lines? How do you know where to start? How do you know when to stop? And the answer to that is, I don't really know. I know it's not helpful, is it? But that's when it is a good idea to have texture underneath. And when I just start out, I look for either circles or something. Sometimes I have a specific design in mind, and then I just go by that. Other times, the background that I have will provide me with ideas. For this one, because it was a bigger piece, it was a bigger sized paper, I knew that I wanted the focal point to be more in the center, and so that's why I started in the center. But then I went and found some of those lighter green spots that I wanted to work with, and started outlining those. When my lines don't meet, like I just did there, I usually end up just drawing another line. Sometimes it bothers me, other times I don't really mind so much. But when it bothers me, then I just draw another line. And to mix up the more rectangular shapes, I incorporate some of the circles. The reason why I call this intuitive art is because I don't know where I'm going with it when I start out. I started out a year ago getting comfortable with this style, and I enjoyed straight circles, if that makes sense. I enjoyed just actual circles. And also, I saw other people do it that way, so I thought maybe that's what I needed to do as well. And when you're just starting out, sometimes it's good to have a little bit more structure, because your brain doesn't really know what to do with all this freedom. Because as human beings, we like structure, even though sometimes we don't want to admit that we like structure, but it gives us something to hold on to. It feels, at least that's what it feels to me. And so the circles gave me that structure. And lately, I have stepped away from the perfect circles, and I just let my hand and my brain do what it wants to do. Will I stop doing perfect circles from now on? Probably not. And that's the fun part about this. You can do whatever the heck you want to do. Sometimes it works out great and you like the end result, and other times you toss it in the bin, or you rework it and you put something entirely different on top. That has also happened in the past. I decided I needed a few more dots up top there, and then later on I will also add some more down here. Sometimes that happens when I feel like an area is a little bare, or I don't want to add more neurolines. So then I just add some more paint dots or fill them with the dotting tool. I've mentioned in previous videos that I tend to stick with a certain style of doodles lately, because I like the look and they feel familiar. But it's interesting that the same doodle style will look completely different on a new piece of painting. And yeah, so when that happens to you and you feel like you gravitate towards similar styles of doodles, just let it happen. Don't worry about, switching it up too much if you feel like you're struggling. with coming up with new doodles every single time that you create a painting. So this is what I saw when I saw that darker green dot in the beginning, and so I am pleased that I am able to make that dot come to life this way. And sometimes also what I do is I incorporate the same style in a different way. For example, right here, I also realized that the lines didn't meet, and I was fortunately able to fix it with just a little bit of water and a paintbrush. But what I was going to say is that I had the black circles on the bottom, and then I had those green dots up top, and so I wanted to continue that line, and by doing that I added those white circles. And this is just another way to make the, I feel like I'm talking like I know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing, but to my eye, it looks nice when I look at the piece and I see, oh, there's circles here, but then there's also dots, and they kind of sort of connect, yet they're different. Does that make sense? Anyway, that's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. I am bringing out my trusty dotting tools, and you might be getting sick of me saying it, but boy, do I love my dotting tool. And I always like to mention, because there's always some comments down below asking what I use, and I am happy to say that I've gotten into the habit of listing everything that I use in the description box, which you can find below this video. Sometimes it's a little hidden, depending on which device you are on, but it should be a drop-down style menu when you click the More button, or it can also be an arrow that you can click right below the video next to the view counter, and that will take you to the list of things that I've used in my videos. And so now I think I have said everything I needed to say and explain about the process of how I created this piece. If there is anything else that needs to be mentioned, I will probably just put text over it, but this way you get a little bit of a break from my chatter as well. I really hope that you enjoyed this video and watching my process. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. I love reading everything that you say and want to contribute. And I will see you in the next one.